Hello and welcome to Alpha 21. Before I head into the main features we as a team integrated or fixed in the mod, I want to give a shout out to the community here for all the reports and well, whatever you found, it's very useful, and all the contributions which were made. I want to mention some here. For example, we got new icons in the religious groups here. Therefore, that's very useful. Thanks for contributing here. We also fixed a lot of bugs which got reported. One very important one to mention is we had the major bug in our bureaucratic recruitment, where you were able to cheat some army basically for free without paying for it. So that's also gone now. And also we fixed a lot of localization, which is basically the text you see in events and so on. So whenever you find something, please report it, and many thanks from everyone for all these findings. Now, back into the Horde, which we are currently here, and to look at one of the features we also integrated from a submod into the main mod is the fast builder. So when you go here into the macro builder, you can find now all the icons for the main infrastructures, from capitals to amenities to pathing. Now, because we are a horde, let's pick pathing. We are going to do something here, and we are selecting these provinces, and we do want to upgrade here, and after some days an event will pop up, and we want to upgrade all roads in the chosen province to, for example, tier 2 here, and then we get a price here which is, well, decent in this case, and we're going to do it. Now, this feature is specifically useful if you want to build a lot of stuff. So as we can see here now, the buildings here are under construction. So if we pick one of the provinces here, we can see pathing is underway here. It's specifically useful if you want to, for example, upgrade a lot of cities at the same time, or you want to build a pathway of roads. Very useful. Then you don't have to click a lot of provinces here by hand, or you have to specifically target them with areas and so on, because it's sometimes not exactly what you want to do, especially if you build like urban infrastructure and to build harbor bridges and so on. You don't want to build it countrywide, more or less. And with that, we can in fact jump into the next main feature, which is already a very important one, specifically for the hordes here, which is called centralization, which in the past or in vanilla was called absolutism or centralization or whatever. It added many names by now, and it's now guided by the state reforms or government reforms here. And in fact, if you look down here, devolution, central collection, these reforms now give you the maximum you can achieve in centralization. And to get these reforms unlocked, you need, for example, to have enough state reach and other conditions fulfilled. For example, the internal structure reforms here. And therefore, the centralization is a bit more in the background now, and part of features we are developing currently. But now you have to really work on that, and also in regards to the hordes itself, we nerfed them quite a lot by not allowing them to, for example, conquer into legalism that easy. For example, you can see here now it would cost 43k cash to embrace centralism here. So this will not go down significantly if you, for example, conquer Great Perm here, which was one way to cheese, for example, centralization. Or centralism or legalism as it was called before, or to, for example, cheese into meritocracy here, which was down here, for example, if you go after Trebizond, or Rome if you are very greedy, or into China if you were playing more east. And also this of course affects the horde in that way that you need another way out to get out of being locked out of centralism or legalism as it was called before. You will get an event or a decision rather here to get rid and get settled, therefore getting the chance and get this massive debuff removed. But you will end up in a civil war if you try it, if your tribes are too strong. For example, clan power here is currently 95%. You have to reduce it significantly to have a peaceful transition or peaceful settlement. Therefore, decide and prepare if you really want to get rid of your horde government, basically all the benefits that come along with it. And yeah, that's definitely a massive impact, especially for the hordes, but also the reforms itself. For example, if we let's switch to Hungary, for example, it's also one of the states which doesn't have a lot of centralization at start because it's really relatively noble driven. Therefore, you also need to drive up state reach here to unlock more centralization. Therefore, getting your reforms here, despite or next to doing your state reforms. Of course, I switched to country so you can't see it here, but basically reforming your country to the shape you want. Jumping into France, now we see the 100 Years Wars raging currently. So we're still in 1357, so let's start. The change we also did is to railroad the 100 Years Wars a little bit more, so you cannot declare that easily wars outside of the 100 Years Wars to force the AI, but also the player to rather finish up the 100 Years Wars and not, for example, go in an expansion outside of that war. So you really have to finish it in one way or another. For example, as France, you can't just jump on Provence now to get your course back if you feel so. But also England cannot just go and attack whatever it wants. There's a lot of railroading here, and not too much, but it's definitely preventing some AI, but also player options to just avoid, well, finishing up the 100 Years War. Also, in regards to, well, let's call it wars, civil wars in this case, if you progress in the game and you unlock more institutions over time, for example, casual literacy, you will increase strength of civil wars when they happen. And so it's now in the UI here too, national civil war strength plus 20%. So in case you want to decide to, for example, crush your nobility by going deliberately into a civil war, it will get harder over time because, well, your population is getting smarter and has more awareness about all the problems in your country, so it's not going to be that easy. But also, you have to go through it. And yeah, also another very tricky situation a lot of players sometimes run into, especially like France, but also in the Balkans here. It also, I think it was also in Ethiopia down here. If you have some kind of complex vassal situations, so you, for example, have divisions here, and some of them are rebellious here, like Zeta, and you sometimes declare war on them. You couldn't peace out with the target you wanted to peace out, but you had to peace out with the overlord, but then you couldn't take the provinces of the subject and so on. There were some cases where that didn't work properly. We tried to fix everything and make it more clear now, but also fix the relations between the overlord and subjects to make sure if someone declares wars, he can in fact take what he really wants to take. And hopefully that covers all eventualities one can encounter. A good example is, for example, if you play Naples here and you conquer into the Balkans, you have to face these kind of divisions of Serbia, and that sometimes can be quite, well, not intuitive to say the least. In fact, let's stay at one of my favorite countries, so let's go to the Naples here, which is quite a lot of fun if you want to go east, for example, into the Balkans. And here, just directly to mention, I want to feature some stuff that has changed on the historic setup. For example, it's a new port here in Verona. Now Verona now has a natural location, a pretty good one. Therefore, if you, for example, expand into the Balkans here, as Naples, you have a stronger port here to, for example, build harborages up. But also, if you are more of a Byzantine player or Ottoman player, this can also be a nice jumping off point for getting into your CE into the Adriatic here. So it's in general quite useful for the region here, depending on what you are playing, basically. Also, there were a lot of small changes to, for example, Tyrol here is now starting as a personal union under Bavaria, and the wife of Bavaria is basically who owned Tyrol here, more or less. And that's something we changed in the starting setup, which also, of course, to a certain degree has an impact on the inheritance events here and so on. Also, as probably many saw in the teasers, there was some change to the Americas. Let me just go there quickly. Now here we are looking at the Americas, at least Middle America. Doesn't that significantly impact South America, but in Middle America we did an overhaul of the population distribution here in Yucatan. Also some new industries were spawned, specifically cacao here, which now is, well, a cash crop industry basically, so outputting exotics and so on. But also a change that was made to the whole region and also South America is that it's no longer consuming delicacies, which it was doing beforehand, leading to a lot of weird impacts, especially when the colonizers arrived and now this region is doing their own thing. And that's increasing the stability basically of the economies in that region here, depending on what you want to play, but specifically here in exotics and luxuries, which also saw some changes here. Now, staying as an observer in the trade map mode, I want to show some other changes we did. Basically, we distributed more marble deposits around the map. It's not many locations, but for example, Athens now has marble. But what I want to mention here is, for example, Bentheim, which now has also shown here in the trade map mode, sandstone mines, which we treat similar to marble, just with a little bit less output. It's not opened at the beginning, so you can open it up. And therefore you can have some more mining basically here in these regions to cover some historic deposits. But also in the trade mode, which is more important now, we did some changes to the inner Africa setup. Not massive ones, but we moved the capital to Mbanza, Congo, which probably was historic. I don't know why it ever was in Songo. And we also added some natural location modifiers, for example here, but also in Yolof here over here, to help these, let's say, exterior regions to be connected to the world economy, because we saw that they sometimes drop out of it and therefore lead to very weird price behaviors or goods which explode in price until a colonizer arrives, and that's of course a problem. Also, we added some urban population here into Degodia and from status Buganda, which also helps these regions to be more stable and get connected to the trade better. And that's basically helping this whole region to be more stable and connected to the economy. However, still the prices here vary a lot from the main global economy, but it's right now connected until a colonizer arrives and he probably can make a profit from the very different price structure here. Also to mention some historic change which was done to, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, just whatever. It now has a steel industry to mimic the Damascus steel, and it also impacts Murph here, which also has now a steel industry. I wouldn't 100% bet on it because, well, most likely there's a certain nomadic invader ravaging this region here. Therefore, don't bet on building these cities up unless you can, for example, build a huge Persia and defend yourself, or you want to play, for example, as Timur himself and therefore, well, take the Persian later as your heartland. And in general, that's basically setups on the historic setup at the beginning of the game. We also did a lot of changes to, in general, what impacts your playstyle in later on. For example, if you are a colonizer, let's say you are Castile and you colonize stuff to the south here, what you will notice or what got changed is if you make a colony, for example, let's take one of the best ones here, you take Cherbourg here, you don't spawn with 1k burgers anymore, it's only 250 now, because what we saw is that the the players are very quick to build up all the trade networks here. This is going to slow it down a little bit, and also not make you shut down all the trade, because if you are the first one, you basically can railroad everything into your trade network. Makes it a little bit harder, and you need more colonies now to really get all the trade from the east to your country, or from Central Africa to your country, whatever you are playing. Also, which is probably impacting everyone, and probably, well, some tears will be lost about it. We nerfed the centers of production and knowledge. They no longer have an output modifier. Instead, they are just a visualize factor here, at least the centers of production. The centers of knowledge still have a little bit of an impact on the institutions and so on. But in general, the output modifiers are removed here, and it's part of our strategy to slowly decrease overall input, because right now the 1356 setup, well, the starting setup is quite stable, but as you probably noticed, everyone who plays a bit more, rurals are king. So if you build crop industries and so on, you get rich very fast, and basically your population is growing very fast, which is not historically correct. So there's currently an abundance of products, and we are slowly trimming down on the production of goods in general. Now also there are some minor changes to productions of like fruit and wine and olives here, which basically are just getting adjusted to how other industries work, considering the climate of the territory and so on. Also a major change, Poland and Hungary are probably good examples, because they are getting impacted by it quite a lot. If you have a lot of forestries, this one is probably a bad example. I don't know. Let's pick this one here. Yes, it says timber. The timber industry itself has been reduced a little bit, because it was outputting raw and fuel, which was quite lucrative. And the mining industry, which Poland, for example, has a lot of, so it has a lot of deposits which are at beginning rather untapped. They are buffed a little bit, so that the coal and the metal output is better now compared to before, which in the end just buffs the mining industry itself a little bit more and reduces the reliance on forestry for basically everything, which was how it worked currently. Now, let's switch into a country. Now we are back at the Blue Horde, and the next change I want to show is, in fact, we changed some idea groups, mostly military. The fortification, for example, quality and quantity ideas have changed a little bit. Therefore, check out the new modifiers these idea groups give you, but also the impact of them for reforms, for example, have changed quite a lot. Now, if you want to do military reforms, for example, let's check it out. We are going into military service here. If you want to, for example, go into enlistment in a late game or mid game, you are going to need 3 full idea groups here. For example, whatever you want to pick, if it quantity, quality, logistics, fortification, whatever. It's now you have to get 3 full idea groups here, and not just give me standing army and I can do all the reforms I want. Therefore, this is going to slow down the reform progress, but also forces you to think about which kind of military ideas you really want to do. You can also not take quantity and quality at the same time, so they are exclusive to each other now, and therefore, well, force you into some decisions here. What to add on that side? It's also that the ideas for, I think it was fortification, which gave garrison cost here, didn't work in the past. We fixed that. I don't know if anyone noticed, but it was just not working. The price reduction was not applied. Now this is, of course, also fixed now. And last but not least, let's stay at ideas here, but not the ones you can pick. In fact, there are idea groups which have been added to the game. We are back in observer mode, and one idea group I want to mention is the Omani ideas which got added now. We can in fact also just tag into them, if we look at them, I mean, some of you probably ever played here as Yemen, which is quite a fun trade nation to play, but Oman is also a trade nation which you want to play maybe, and it's like the poor version of Yemen, similar to the Portugal of the East basically. And you got like bonuses which are playing into that direction: commerce efficiencies, naval stuff, more force limits, more naval outputs, and so on. Basically, mostly focused on being that remote nation here to trade well and fare well and punch a little bit over your weight because you are relatively small and poor, and probably, or not probably, but you are pretty strongly dominated by tribes. Another country which also got ideas is Cyprus, which is one of the Crusader nations, and in the last updates, as you saw, we changed and added some stuff for the Crusader nations. The Cypriots now also do have their own idea groups, which were lacking beforehand. They were still on the version of 2.5 basically, but now they got some matching stuff as the, well, inheritor of the Crusader nation or Crusader kingdoms here of the Levant. And yeah, I think that's the more or less general overview of the patch itself. A lot of small stuff. There's of course tons of fixes we did in the background. Feel free to read through them in the changelog, but not all of them are like significant or rather edge cases, so I don't want to go through all of them in this video. Well, I would say have fun, feel free, and report anything you notice, whatever it might be. And therefore, see you next time.